Welcome everyone, my name is Archimus and today we are going to learn how to set up a Valheim server on a Linux server. Now some of the assumptions and requirements for this to work are as follows. Now in this case we're using an Ubuntu server 20.04 with root access, not a requirement, but that's what I'm most comfortable with, so that's what I'm using. You can use CentOS, Fedora, Debian, whatever the case may be. Now you also need a working internet connection for two reasons. A, to get the actual game files to run the server, and B, if you're hosting, then you need to be able to have a working internet connection to obviously host and allow people in from the internet. Now, if you are hosting, you also need the ability to do port forwards on your router, firewall, whatever the case may be. Now, the ports needed are 2456 and 2457 on UDP by default. Now, the 2456 port is used for the client server communication. The 2457 is for queries done by the Valheim system to make it appear in the big list of things. Now, you can get away with running a 2-core CPU system with 4 gig of RAM, but I wouldn't recommend it. It will be, worked very hard would be the nicest way of putting it. We run a 4-core system with 8 gig of RAM, and we're running 6 people on that with absolutely no trouble at all. Now, an important thing to note is that all of this information is coming from a system called Linux Game Server Managers. Oh, sorry, let me amend that. It is not all of it, is 95%. Most of the information is from there. I'm just adding in a couple of minor bits and pieces here and there to help in addition to their information. I'll put a link to their site in the description below. There you can get other server systems like Half-Life 2 Deathmatch, Minecraft, Quake, all that sort of thing. Now, what I'm going to be showing you is just the base install, some of the tricks that I found getting it set up initially, and then how to import a world you might already have been running on a Windows PC or running it solo and you want to put it out on the internet. Okay, so what we're going to start with is the base dependencies that the LGSM, Linux Game Server Manager System, needs. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick off this. Once again, all these commands are on their website, so it's very easy to find. I'm not going to sit here and rehash, everything from the ground up. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this install. There will be a single prompt partway through for Steam command. And what I'll do is I will come back to you in a moment once that's popped up and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so as I said before, it'll pop up asking you to accept the license agreement for Steam command. That's fine to accept. That's just used to actually install and do all the background work on the Valheim game server itself. So I'll be back in just a second once that's finished installing everything. Okay, so that's all the base dependencies installed now for the LGSM system. So the first thing we're going to do is add a new user. That user's will be running the actual game server itself. Now, what I would suggest here is setting a long, complicated password that no one's ever going to guess. Make sure you note it, of course, but generally you'll never need to use it. Okay, so we do that. Now we pretend to be that user. And now we're going to start by grabbing the LGSM core files and let it do the initial part of the installation. Now, this is the big bit here. Depending on your actual internet connection, your server, hard drives, all that sort of stuff, this could take anywhere from 5 minutes up to 15 minutes. On this system I'm using here, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to install, and that includes grabbing all the files off the internet. So what we'll do is we'll get to a point where it starts Steam command and starts running everything, and then I'll pause it, and then we'll wait until it finishes the actual major part of it all. Now, the other thing it'll also ask you, are you sure you want to install it in this location? /home/vh server. That's fine. So we're going to answer yes to that. It'll grab a few more bits and pieces, start creating a few folders, and then it'll check to make sure that those dependencies that we installed earlier are all installed and good to go. And yeah, you should always get green along here. You should never get red or anything saying that it wasn't installed. especially if you use the commands direct from the LGSM website. So what we're going to do now is this is going to kick off the installation process with the Steam command. We'll pause it here for a few moments. I'll be back in a second once all the actual hard work's been done. Back in just a moment. Okay, so the long part's done. It'll ask you if it's successful. If it's got the green complete, then you're good to go. It may ask you here also, do you want to allow some usage statistics? That's up to you guys. In this case, because we're only doing this as a test, I'm just going no. Okay, so now the most important command is VH Server. It will control everything for you. You can start, stop, restart, details, console, that sort of thing. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the details command, which is VH Server details. And what it will do is it'll pop up a list of all the information about your server. In that, we've got things like what ports it's configured for, the name of the server, if there's a password set, the world name, whether it's public, and the save dir. The save dir is very important. /home /vh server.config unity 3d irongate valheim. We're going to need that later because we'll need that if we're importing a world from, let's say, a Windows PC. So let's get more into that side of it straight away, is that if you are going to import a world from a Windows PC, whether it's something you've done by yourself or it's already hosted on a Windows server, that sort of thing, you need to copy two files, the DB and FWL file. Now those are normally located under C, users, your login name, for example, Archimus, app data, local low, irongate, Valheim worlds. Now, upload those two files to your Linux server. In our case, and make note of the name. Our case, the name of the files and the world is learning. So what we'll do first of all is we're going to edit the main configuration file, which controls most of what we're going to need to do. So it is, I'm using Nano because that's what I prefer. Nano -w lgsm /config -lgsm /vh server /vh server.cfg. Now the two most important things to put in here is server name, which is the name that will appear in the Valheim server list. Okay, so if you were to go fully public with it all and have it so your friends can connect to it, things like that, if you don't want to provide the IP address and you want it to appear in that big list, you have a server name, and in this case, we have Learning with Archimus. Now, at the moment, you have to have a password set for the LGSM Valheim server to work correctly. I don't know if this is by design or if it's a bug, but if you don't set this password, it won't actually work. Now, obviously, set something a bit more complicated than password. We're just using that as an example. Now, if we're importing a world, we need to make sure we set the name of it here as well. So in our case, it was learning. So that's what we put there. Now, let's say you're running a Discord server. It doesn't have to be Discord. It can be email and other such things. And you want to have it alert admins when the server crashes and things like that, which is a section we'll get into a bit later on. We also set here Discord alert equals on, and then Discord webhook equals, and you put in the long URL that you have to have for that actual webhook for that particular channel. Now, we're not doing that in this particular case because this is only our learning server. All right, so that there, from what we've just done. Now, if you look above here, this is the old settings. We've got the name, Valheim server, password, world, and all that sort of thing. If we now go back and rerun that details command, you'll now see it's showing as Learning with Archimus with the password and the world name being learning. So now what we do is we start the server with VH server start. Now, each time you run each of these commands for the first time, it'll take a couple of extra seconds while it grabs the latest version of them off the internet. Once it's done the first time, it doesn't take any time at all to run it up the second time. All right, so now server has started. If we go back and have a look at the details again, you'll see the status is now saying started. So then if we want to, we can go VH Server console. Now console will bring up the actual server console that we can see. The very important thing to remember is don't use Control-C as it warns here, because that will actually cause the server to crash. Instead, use Control-B and then the letter D for disconnect, and that'll disconnect you from the list. So here's our server console. If you had stuff happening on the server, like a whole bunch of players running around doing stuff, you might see a bit more information there. At the moment, we've got no one on there, so it's just some basic data. So go Control-B and then D. That'll bring us to here. Now, if you want to stop the server, VH server stop. The important thing to remember is that with Valheim servers, with LGSM, it can take a little bit of time before the server stops. Sometimes it can be only 5 seconds, sometimes it can be 20, 30 seconds. Depends on how big the world is that's been explored and a few other parts in there. Now, let's say you've already got the server running, you just want to do like a quick maintenance restart, you've changed something in one of the config files, something like that. Maybe you've changed the password. You can then go to run VH server restart. What that'll do is it will stop the server and then restart it straight away. Okay, so the next part of what we're going to do is quite simply doing the import of our existing world. So for that, if the server is running, stop it, because you can't access the files while it's happening. Let's get a few seconds to stop. Okay, nearly there. Once again, as I said before, it can take a little bit extra depending on what's happening at the time. 5 seconds the first time, 11 seconds the second time. Now, I've already uploaded those two files to this Linux box. You will have to have done the same thing as well and copy them from the location wherever you uploaded it to. So in this case, it was from the learning user, and we'll have two files. You can see here learning.db, learning.fwl. So you want to copy both of those to that save location that was up there before, which is home, VH server /.config, Unity 3D, Irongate, Valheim, and then under there, there's a worlds folder. So if you copy those two files to there, now there may already be files there, that's fine, overwrite them if it does prompt you to overwrite them. And then you can go VH server start, and that's your world from your Windows PC now running on your Linux box. Now, two more things to do after this is first of all set up some maintenance tasks, which will do things like monitor the server, do updates, that sort of thing. So go cron tab -E. Once again, this may change per Linux flavor, but on Ubuntu, this is what you use. If it prompts you, choose your favorite editor. Now, all this information is available on the Linux Game Servers Manager's website. Okay, so the first three commands we've got here is we've got VH server monitor. So what will happen is every 5 minutes, it'll run this command to say, is the server running? If not, restart it up. And if you have something like that Discord alert enabled, it'll actually send an alert through to say, server had crashed, I've restarted it for you. So that way admins know what's going on. Now the thing to remember with that is that if you've done a VH server stop, that monitor command won't start the server for you automatically. It actually looks for a special flag to say server has actually been started with a VH server start. So that way, if you're in the middle of doing maintenance on it, it doesn't just run every 5 minutes and automatically start it for you. Second command runs every 30 minutes, but that can be changed. And what that does, it checks for Valheim game updates for the server. Now, generally, you may not want to have this run every 30 minutes. You might only want this to run, let's say, at 3 a.m. each day. So in that case, if we change that to a 0, then a 3, then remove that. So there you go. Right now, the way that is set, at 3 a.m. each day, it'll check for a game server update. The last command only runs on Sunday at midnight, and what that does, it checks for the actual Linux Game Server Manager core file updates and see if there's anything new that needs to be done. Now, this extra command is not part of the documentation, unfortunately, but what this does is at boot, it will actually, Linux server boot that is, it'll actually wait 30 seconds and then start the server for you, the Valheim server, even if you do a reboot. So that way, if the Linux server crashes overnight or something like that, you don't have players messaging you going, why isn't the Valheim server working? This will just start it up for you automatically. Okay, so I'll leave that there for a second. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to look at, I'll save that, is how to monitor how the system is running. This is just, it's not essential, but this just makes it easier. I use a command called htop. And what that allows me to see is all 4 cores in this particular case. If you only have 2 cores or you got 8 cores, appropriately it'll change, and how they're running, how much memory is being used, and then what the top processors are and how hard they're running the system. So for at the moment, Valheim is currently using up 22% CPU on this, basic system that I've got running for this test. Okay. All right, so what we'll do now is we shall swap to the actual game, and I'm going to join it on that new server that we just created. What I'll do in a second is it'll prompt us for the password. Here we are. Put in our super complicated password that we set earlier. It'll then do its usual thing and take a minute or 2 before it finally actually loads in. Now, I've turned off the game audio for now, only because, as you may know, Valheim can be a little noisy if it's in the middle of a storm or something like that. So let's give that a few seconds. And here we go. We are loaded in, and the game is all here good to go. Now, I haven't built anything in this particular world because this is just a learning one that I just built quickly to see how I'd go for it all. And that's it. Okay, everyone. Well, thanks for watching this tutorial. If you found it handy, then please hit that magic like button and subscribe for some more content. I'll be releasing more how-to server videos in the coming weeks, along with some in-game tutorials on things like Minecraft, mods, Valheim, Escape from Tarkov, that sort of thing. All right, so thanks again, everyone, and have fun playing.